Hello, my name is Brittany New, and I am an entrepreneur living in Barcelona, Spain. I'm here with Dr. Dave Asomaning, who is an executive coach. And Dave, why don't you tell us a little bit more about you and what you do?
Thanks so much, Brittany. Good to be with you for our October call, our show, the Dave and Brittany show, as I've gotten used to uh, practicing saying it. As you mentioned, Brittany, I'm an executive coach and I live in Florida. And I specialize in supporting CEOs, executives, entrepreneurs, and other leaders to develop miracle mindsets. This whole show that we've been doing is all about how to strengthen and continually develop miracle mindsets. And these miracle mindsets lead to improved effectiveness, ease, and fulfillment in the professional and personal lives of the leaders I work with. So thank you, Brittany, so much for hosting this interview as you've done for the past 9 months of this year, 2021. It's been a very, very productive experience. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. It's my pleasure. I really love this. And especially, we have a theme ongoing this year, which is the theme of forgiveness. So in each of these episodes, we talk about forgiveness in the context of a different lesson from A Course in Miracles. And so that is what I love about this show, is that it's just so positive, and it just is a really nice side project to have going and talking about these lovely things. And today is going to be no exception. The lesson sounds very positive, very idealistic, and so I look forward to diving into that. I will go ahead and read the lesson, and then I'll ask you to take it over from there, because you told me that this is one of your favorite lessons from A Course in Miracles. So today's lesson is lesson number 23. And the main headline of the lesson says, I can escape from the world I see by giving up attack thoughts. And I'm really looking forward to unpacking that. But what I first like is that it talks about escaping from the world you see. And I mean, especially if you're going through any rough time, that's always a nice thing to be able to do. But this maybe could even be taken regardless of whether you're having a good time or a bad time. I guess we'll find out what the lesson is trying to get at. So Dave, why don't you take it from there?
Well, thank you. Great layup. I appreciate it. It's great. So, yeah, diving right in. The reason this is one of my favorite lessons is because it gives step-by-step teaching on why the world we see is a simulation or an illusion, or from there, why I, in what I think is a more user-friendly way, like to say to all my clients at some point or another that everything you experience in your life is your movie. Or, in keeping with the title of the book that we did the launch around recently, everything that a person sees is their nightmare. Right? So these are all different ways to invite our dialogue partners, clients, friends, family, anybody, but for me, mostly my clients, into ongoing conversation about how everything they're going to tell me about, good, bad, and indifferent, is part of a movie that they're actually projecting from their minds.
Okay.
Right? So that top line, I can escape from the world I see, is really code for I can escape from my movie or my nightmare by giving up my attack thoughts. Right? So this is a great lesson to use to teach people who are interested in going deeper with this idea, sort of why or how A Course in Miracles approaches the world of perception the way that it does. Great teaching tool for that. So frequently people in my circle, clients who know one another and clients I've worked with for a while, they'll say, oh yeah, it's your movie, it's my movie, I get it. So let's say you have a conflict on a team. I know this is the application of it. We'll talk about some more later maybe, but let's say a team is having some conflict between members, right? So in a kind of somewhat popularized way, the team members might start saying, "Oh, well, if you are trying to blame me, it's your movie. Don't pull me into your movie. That's your movie." Or, they'll use it that way, and it's kind of, air quotes, cute to see people beginning to actually use this idea that everybody's in their own movie, and that, I mean, there's more applications to it. But anyway, so I think it's a step forward for people to be able to begin to say, "Oh, I'm in a movie, or I'm in a simulation, or I'm in a nightmare," and then this lesson allows us to really get more specific. So let me run through some of the things in the lesson that I think are really fascinating and helpful. So in the very first paragraph, it says that this idea for today is the only way out of fear that will ever succeed. Nothing else will work and everything else is meaningless. And I'm always quick to add that it's not saying literally the words here in this Course in Miracles approach to it are these words are the only way out of fear, right? If this exists in Islam or Buddhism or Christianity or quantum physics or wherever it exists in thousands of other approaches to getting out of a nightmare, there's a specific way in which getting out can be done. Any other way won't work, right? And it's going to explain to us what the way is, and also help us understand why other ways won't work. But it says then this way cannot fail, right? And then it quickly goes on to say every thought you have makes up some segment of the world you see, right? So it's setting up this idea that everything we're looking at is actually a projection of some part of the mind. I'll pause after paragraph 2 and check in with you to see if you have any questions. So in paragraph 2, it then, almost like a sleight of hand, says that the cause of the movie that we're watching, or the world that we see, or the nightmare we're in, is attack thoughts. It didn't say that in the first paragraph. It just said our thoughts are making up the world we see. Now it adds that it's our attack thoughts that are making up the world that we see, or the movie that we see. And then furthermore, that we must learn that it is the attack thoughts we don't want. We need to release the attack thoughts. Then it says here that there's no point in lamenting the world or complaining about it or going on and on about what's not working in the movie. And there is no point in trying to change the world that we're watching out there, changing the people, places, things externally. It says all those things are incapable of change because they're merely an effect, right? But there is indeed a point in changing your thoughts about the world. Here you're changing the cause. So extending on the movie metaphor, it's like, yeah, if you go to a movie and you're watching, I don't know who your favorite screen people are, like, I don't know, Brad Pitt and Julia Roberts or Angela Bassett and Denzel Washington, whatever the mix is. You're watching them and you're like, oh, don't do that, don't do that. They're gonna get you sleeping with the enemy. They're, don't, oh no. It's all a waste of time because they can't hear us and they won't do anything differently, no matter how excited we get about what we're seeing in that movie. So again, it helps to encourage people to not overinvest time in complaining about what they're seeing and going on and on about it and trying to get the people out there to change, right? It brings the focus back to transforming what's inside so that you get a different movie. Not just that you interpret the movie differently, but you actually get a different movie. Any thoughts or comments so far? Anything you want to raise or,
Yeah, I guess the main thing that comes to mind is it's very difficult. This must be difficult because when you have a movie, this issue, this problem, this nightmare, it feels so real. The effects feel so real. I've got bills to pay and I lost my job, that kind of problem. To just check out of it, it's so difficult. And checking out isn't probably the right word. So I guess that's where spirit is a necessary ingredient in this process, because if you simply decide to, ignore what's going on, maybe nothing will change. But if you ask also spirit for help in this process, then not only do you not spend your time and energy lamenting on the problem, but then things will align to help you improve. And then your better mindset will allow you to see the better opportunities and the miracles unfolding. So that kind of answers my question, how to deal with the dangers of, the lack of willingness to ignore, we could say, reality. So that's what comes to my mind.
Great. Yeah, you're anticipating the solution here, right? There's a solution, and again, you hit the ball out of the park in the sense that the essence of the solution is to partner with spirit, right? That's the essence of the solution. There are some technical things that we'll talk about in just a bit that make the application of this more precise about exactly how to engage spirit so that spirit can be most effective on our parts. And we'll get to that in just a moment. But you also reminded me that part of the fun I have with this lesson with clients and other people, for instance, going with the metaphor of movie is, so with the client, sometimes I'll say, so what's today? What are we going to do? Is today a Netflix kind of a day? Should I get out my popcorn and soda? And are you going to tell me about your movie? And are we getting into the movie? And you just, I'll hang back and you just tell me your movie. This person did this to me and that happened and that person's a bad guy and they're chasing me around the block with a machete and they almost got me, but I escaped. Do you like popcorn? Do you like soda? Let's watch the movie. Let's watch the Netflix flick. Is this season 1? Is this season 2? Episode 4? Where are we? So, and I contrast that with, and it's kind of a joking way. I don't do it like to be mean or cruel or anything like that. And with most clients, they get it. It's an invitation to just tell me where the pain is, right? And I'll listen with compassion and empathy to where the pain is. But we also, I set it up that way because we have an alternative, which is that we can also focus on changing the movie, right? So sometimes people are very into, I want to explain the movie. I want you to follow every single plot twist and every detail. And when it comes to changing the movie, it's a little bit like, I don't know if I really want to do that work. I really am more rewarded and find more excitement. And I get more invested if I can just tell you the movie. And then I always use this metaphor as like, okay, is this a Netflix soda and popcorn session, or are we looking at how we're going to produce better Netflix shows? Any reactions to that? And then we'll keep going.
Yeah, I wanted to know if you had a technical term, or if you technically attributed this desire to the ego, because why is it that we love to hang on to these stories and we love to be victims and we love to be sad? You'd say, do you like being sad? No, but then sometimes you kind of do want to wallow in your own situation. So would you attribute that to ego? Is that?
Yeah, the malicious ego is driving all of that, right? So that obviously if it keeps us obsessing within the movie and shaking our fist at Julia Roberts on the screen or Denzel Washington on the screen of our lives, the more it gets us to do that, the less we're going to change anything. And the more we're going to suffer over time, right? So for the ego, that's a great investment of effort. Like just get the people to talk about their misery and they'll feel it's real and they'll feel like there's no way to get out of it. So that's from the ego's perspective. It's to the ego's benefit to maximize suffering. From a human perspective, I think we've all been there and we know that you can really get your juices flowing by telling a good, juicy story about how much you've suffered. People are like listening and they're intent and, oh, I'm so sorry. And I mean, the term of art in psychological circles is that's secondary gain, right? It's called secondary gain. There's a benefit, a reward for having a good, painful, juicy story to tell people, right? And so, you can kind of get some temporary relief from doing that, but in the long run, it's destructive from the human perspective because the benefit keeps us invested in the negative script rather than getting to the place in terms of technique and so on where you can change the story. So to your point, I'm just saying that there's two levels to it. The ego's sort of manipulating us, if you will, if you want to anthropomorphize it, to stay stuck in negative scripts. And then there's a kind of palpable kind of relief we almost feel when we get the sympathy.
Yeah.
For our stories of woe.
Okay, that's good. Pivoting a little bit back to what I was saying about the attack thoughts and ignoring reality, another thought that came to mind is that it's not always the reality that even is the negative experience. It's the thought that is coming out of the reality. So for example, in this example of, oh, I need money to pay my bills and I don't have it. That might be a fact, but then you might have other attack thoughts such as I'm a failure, or everything is going wrong in my life, or I'm not, even just as simple as I'm not going to be able to pay this bill is not necessarily true. Maybe that day comes and it ends up that you can't. But maybe if you're worried about something in advance, then your attack thought about that future thing is preventing you from taking the necessary steps to get there. So yeah, I have to remind myself that the attack thoughts do not only mean reality, it's our perception of reality and the negativity that we absorb. So changing those thoughts really has no harm done. Yeah.
Exactly. Exactly. There's two levels to this. One is the metaphysical level, which says that our negative thoughts, both the ones we're aware of and those that we're not, that are unconscious, are manifesting the experiences of difficulty and stuckness that we're experiencing. And then the second layer is how we feel about the stuckness of the movie. That's what you're talking about those two different things. And
definitely.
Certainly having a better interpretation about the movie is a step in the right direction. This lesson, as we hopefully will make clear before we're finished, talks about changing the movie entirely.
Okay.
At its metaphysical level, not just the way we interpret it. This is
right.
So continue. Thank you for your input. Just excellent to hear your thoughts. So if you're welcome, yeah. So if we go to paragraph 3, now it's saying not only is the world we see caused by attack thoughts, now it's saying the world we see is a vengeful world. Wow. It's like another kind of introduction of a layer of grimness about it. And that everything that we see in it is a symbol of vengeance, right? And then people say at this point, as we're going through the lesson line by line, if we've gotten to that place in our work, they're like, come on. You know, not everything that we see in the movie is a symbol of vengeance. I mean, newborn babies are so cute and cuddly, people in love, great scientific achievements, musical achievements. There's all kinds of things in the movie that, you know, that are inspiring and positive. Why are you so down? And why is this saying that everything in the movie is a symbol of vengeance? And I didn't know this. I mean, I learned it from the course and from people who have taught the course very, very well in their books and so on. So the best understanding I have of what this section is saying is that essentially the movie, the reason the movie is a vengeful movie is because it's fading away from the moment we're born. The movie we're experiencing in space and time is going to end with death, one way or another. So the whole thing is like a fearful experience of how we get as much in it as possible, as much benefit while we're in it as possible, with the understanding that it's going to pass away. And this is a very scary thought to us, which makes the whole thing from beginning to end a symbol of vengeance, which is death. Yeah, so that's where we're coming from. And then like I will usually say, like a horror film too, it usually doesn't start with from the beginning to the end, although some slasher films of late, I don't know much about these because I don't watch them, but some slasher films of late, I imagine there's just buckets of blood from the beginning to the end. But a lot of times it's like a campfire, kumbaya, there's a guitar playing. Somebody hears a twig snap and they're like, what was that? And they're like, oh, don't worry, you know, have another marshmallow. And then they're like, another, you know, it always starts peacefully and then crescendos up. And for a lot of people, that's how their lives are. You know, the nightmare of it gets more compelling as time moves on into the movie. And you're like, oh, wow, finances are hard. My health is hard. I remember people saying to me who are elderly, like that, yeah, getting old is no walk in the park. It's, you know, that kind of thing. So, so moving along here, I just want to touch on a few other things before we finish. So it says in paragraph 4, the first sentence, it says, you see the world you have made, or the movie, right? World is sort of synonymous with the movie or the nightmare. So it says, you see the world you have made, but you do not see yourself as the image maker, right? So here it's just trying to remind us that as ridiculous as it seems that we made the movie in which we're suffering, we scripted it, we put it into motion, we keep it in place, through the trickery of the ego, we actually forget that we put in place and into motion the whole movie that we're watching, right? And I think it's a compelling point to remember, because for a lot of people, they're like, well, no, my brother was murdered, I was raped. I mean, I'm a victim here. I did not want this, and it happened to me, right? So the other thing we have to be a bit careful of is that we're not blaming people who have experienced horrendous things happen to them. We're not saying it's your fault, right? We're not getting into the intricacies of fault within the movie. We're just saying that from a certain perspective, the main benefit of this is that it will help people create a better movie. If you apply it, whatever movie you're currently in terms of all the dynamics of victimization and oppression, this technique helps you to get a better movie if you apply it. That's the real payoff. It's very hard to assign blame and responsibility and things like that within the movie. It's kind of a lost cause in some ways. Although, again, in the actual movie, you're the murderer. Yeah, you murdered them. You might go to prison for life. You might be executed, whatever. But that's in the movie, you know. But for everybody involved, how do we make it a better movie? So, any reactions, any thoughts, and then we're almost sort of at the punchline of all of this.
Okay. Yeah, the only reaction or thought is that I can see that, again, building off of how you said, it's not about changing your perception, it's about changing the movie itself. This is a long-term plan. This isn't an overnight. It might not be, depending on how intricate your movie is and how entangled in it you are. This is a long-term work. And through working on this over time, you can actually, change your entire life. And yeah, I can see that now. It's not an overnight solution. This is a lifestyle.
Yeah, it's an ongoing practice. Although, to your point, you qualified this very nicely. I love how you did this. You can sometimes get immediate results. And that makes it very rewarding and compelling to do this. And I'll share a personal example in just a moment, but I really appreciate how you qualified that very carefully. So here we are. We're in paragraph 5. And it says here, I'm skipping a little bit. In paragraph 5, it says, the idea for today introduces the thought that you are not trapped in the movie you see because its cause, i.e. your deeper attack thoughts, can be changed, right? Or the movie, and then the movie can be changed. And so the change, this is the formula, sort of the punchline I try to bring my clients' attention to. They're like, wow, that's a very fast description. I would never get what you're saying from just this one sentence. But, you say, like you said, Brittany, over time, as you study the course, you begin to see, you can plug in and expand on these points here, right? So these are the steps. This is the formula, if you want a formula, for how to change the movie. The change requires first that the cause be identified and then let go so that it can be replaced. The movie can be replaced. Then it says here, the first 2 steps in this process require your cooperation. The final step does not. Your images have already been replaced. By taking the first 2 steps, you will see that this is so. So let's break this down a little bit. And this is really the punchline, and I'll illustrate with a personal example. So the change requires first that the cause be identified, right? Which is that I'm 100% responsible for this movie. On some deep unconscious level, I've put into motion the attack thoughts that are manifesting this pain and suffering that I'm experiencing. The second step in the formula is that after I say I'm 100% responsible for this movie, that number 2, I'm willing to let my movie go so that it can replace. It's a little bit like when a DVD is in a DVD player. We say, okay, I put that DVD in there that's playing the movie that I don't like. I have to then eject the DVD that's in there so that the better DVD can be put in there. If I'm blocking it being ejected, then you can't put another DVD in there, right? So then it's saying here that the better DVD, the peaceful, blissful, joyful, loving, miraculous DVD has already been prepared for us. We just have to get ours out of the way that we're holding in place and be willing to do that so Spirit can put in the better DVD for us. So let me just illustrate this real quickly from sort of one of the experiences I've had. So I've mentioned to you before that I had congestive heart failure and was at death's door in 2014, right? So admitted to the hospital, and you could die, you could die, you could die. I was like, wow, that was such a shock. I was like, I'm so not anywhere near close to finishing what my mission in life is. How can I be dying? That's just incomprehensible. It's the saddest thing to me. Like, aside from all the other issues of fear about death, and it was just craziness. And I didn't really have a sense that I was dying. I just had swollen feet and I was palpitating a lot. I had arrhythmia. I couldn't eat. I couldn't sleep. But I didn't think I was dying. I thought I was having an extended panic attack, So they stabilized my heart. It took them about a week and a half to 2 weeks. And then they were trying to convince me to have open heart surgery to replace the valve. And I was really against it. I felt like it was too mechanical, and that the approach that I preferred was one that was more holistic. And I felt like I was screaming in my nightmare that there's a better solution, and nobody was listening to me. They were kind of blowing me off, and it's something we do all the time, minimal risks, you'll be back to normal. I was like, I don't know. I was a chaplain in a hospital, in a transplant unit, no less, along my career path, and easier said than done is what I came up with as my conclusion about all that. So the punchline of this whole thing is that when I was in the hospital, through a series of books that I read, I got led to the steps that I just mentioned, right? And I was like, okay, I'm desperate. I'll apply these steps. So I'm 100% responsible for why I'm in this situation with congestive heart failure at death's door and needing open heart surgery and don't want it, and these people aren't listening to me. That's the first thing. I'm willing to let my movie go, this movie of suffering that I've created or made in the course terms. So I did all of that. It was exhausting. It was a several-hour process of trying to put all this together and understand it better. Went to sleep for a couple of hours, woke up at about 4 or so, and went to the bathroom and was urinating blood when I went to the bathroom.
Oh
And
no.
I was so upset. I was like, well, I thought I just figured out the magic recipe. I applied the recipe. Now it looks like I have another condition. I must be bleeding from my kidney or something,
Oh my
something.
gosh.
And so I was really upset. I was like, this doesn't work. Your miracle thing. Yeah, you're just fooling yourself. None of it works. So I went back to sleep, slept fitfully for a little bit. And then about 7:38, nurses were coming in, doctors were coming in. And everybody's message was, we've noted that you're bleeding in your urine. We're going to send you home because your heart is stable now enough that you can go home, although you're not out of danger yet. If you overexert yourself in the least way, like climbing the steps to the second story floor of where you live, you could really, die, basically was the message I was told as they were sending me home. So stay on the ground floor, bring your whole life down there, don't climb those stairs. And so I was smiling by that point, year to year, because I had dodged the bullet of the surgery being 2 days away.
Okay.
Yeah, so I was like, oh, okay, I get how this works. They are the ones who are sending me home. I've complained and said I don't want the surgery. They weren't listening to me. But with this urine in my blood, they sent me home. Right? They were like, go home. So a reprieve from the surgery. Final part of the story is that I went back for the tests a month later, all the different tests. I was taking my medication, all that. And they basically said, whatever was there, it's gone. It's not there anymore. The surgery's canceled. So
Wow.
yeah, 2014, we're in 2021, 7 years. I'm not on medication. I didn't have the open heart surgery. I didn't die. And I can exercise 3 times a week. I get on my bike, my stationary bike, and I do 30 minutes of vigorous exercise. At my worst in the hospital, I could not sit up like I'm sitting now for 2 or 3 minutes without losing consciousness, right? So any exertion at all would tax my heart, and I would begin to lose consciousness because it couldn't really pump properly. So for me, this formula is really rooted in a personal experience, that changed everything relatively quickly. I didn't have a medical background, didn't know the last little thing about what was going on with my heart. I was up against 4 specialists and a team of nurses. They were all directing me down this pathway. And yet somehow with Spirit's intervention, I pulled out of something, dodged that initial bullet, and then the whole thing was gone afterwards, right? So, I teach this with a passion. I don't say ignore your physicians or don't go to your physicians. I was helped by my physicians. They stabilized my heart. They gave me the medication that calmed my heart down and then allowed me to then partner with Spirit for the rest of the miracle. So I think that the two can work together. It's not one or the other. So any other thoughts for you? That's pretty much what I've got about this lesson. It's the reason it's my favorite, because I had a real amazing miracle of recovery from a catastrophic illness. I have the steps. I can teach them to other people without making exaggerated claims. Work with your doctor, work with other professionals to help. But if you add this ingredient, it could give you the release from your nightmare, further release. Any thoughts on your side?
Yeah, first of all, I have to say that is an incredible story. I'm so proud of you that you were able to make that shift. I can't imagine how the story would have ended if you hadn't done that, right? We don't want to know.
Lights out.
Yeah, so great work there. And that must have been such a hard thing to do in that moment of desperation and shock and fear. But I wanted to ask you to clarify, if you can, to help us practice with more specific example. What would you say was the attack thought, and how did you replace it?
Great.
So going with kind of the application.
Yes. Great question. Thank you for asking it. So within the context of the formula, I'm responsible, and then I'm giving up what I'm responsible for and holding on to in my movie. Your question is, so what's the specific detail or color of that, right? And then in my case, which is the same for a lot of people, I thought that the right path in being a good Christian, for many, many years, I got this earlier in my life from when I was a preteen to when I was a teenager, was to be a martyr. Right? So that was the thought in my mind, that in order to be a good Christian and to follow Jesus, and there are even places in the Bible where it says, pick up your cross and follow me. And if you can't do that, if you're not willing to do that and leave home and sacrifice and sort of enter this semi-monastic life of a disciple of Jesus's, which entails some degree of giving up and suffering and all of that, then you're not worthy to be a disciple. So I think I picked up on those things, glommed onto them, and then had this fantasy that I was a real trooper for Christ, that I was willing to be a martyr. So a lot of the movies I loved were all about movies of martyrs, different bishops and archbishops and Martin Luther King and all these different things, like all kinds of martyrs. I was really engrossed with those types of stories. And part of the message I was picking up that was being downloaded to me intuitively, I just say God was telling me, but it's really more of an intuitive sort of kind of awakening to what the message is that I was really glorifying this type of sacrifice and dying and death, and that I wanted a version of this, a story like that, to be able to tell. Oh, look, after everything I've done, I had this congestive heart failure and I almost died, and oh my God, it's like, there but for the grace of God go I. And the story was like a story of martyrdom in a disguised way, if that makes any sense. And so I was giving all of that up. I was like, yeah, I don't need that. I don't want that. I'm willing to let it all go. I don't need that movie. Give me a better movie. So.
And now, since you had that experience, because that's a very real, that's a very like, thank you for being honest about that. Because I think a lot of people have this, especially depending on which religious background they have similar thoughts. So you can say today you have kind of a different belief that there's no truth to that, right? Yeah. And it
Exactly.
took this experience for you to A, realize that you were thinking that subconsciously, and then B, make sure that you stop.
Yeah, I mean, by that point, I had been a student of the course for 20 years. So, to your point about the fact that it's a slower, longer process of learning, right? I had probably absorbed many layers of learning that that's not legitimate. Martyrdom is not the legitimate way. It's a bit of a corruption. I think what Jesus is talking about ultimately is give up your ego, not launch full force into embracing suffering. You know that, and I think that that's the better understanding. But the point, of all of this, and to your question, which is again very perceptive, is that I had deeply embedded programming within the deeper layers of my psyche. And it took all of this to bring it to the surface more fully, what it was doing to me, which is killing me. If you want to be a martyr, then the thing that you want to be a martyr around will kill you prematurely and inauspiciously, if that's a word. Yeah, I think it's a word. So, so I mean, I was like, okay, let's start releasing all of that. Let's release every other form of martyrdom and needless, useless suffering for myself. And then that's usually what I'm trying to help clients with. Is like somewhere inside, you agreed to suffer as a form of power for yourself. It makes you even more powerful than God if you say, I'll suffer. Then God can't do anything about that because you've defined what your movie's going to be like. And so all of this that we're talking about is giving that up and giving God a part in helping us to not suffer. You know?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Thank
Thank
you for
you.
answering that. That is very informative
Oh,
for
good.
how. Yeah, that's good.
Yeah. I mean, that's why I mean, again, platitudes, trite, simple, simplistic, overly, boiled down things aren't all that useful. But I usually like to say the formula is you're 100% responsible for whatever you're in, financially, medically, health wise, relationally. If you don't like it, it's because the ego got you to agree to a movie of suffering that you're colluding in, and this is the way out of it, right? I'm 100% responsible. I'm willing to let it go, whatever it is. And then we can expand it, teach on it, go to the lesson, study it step by step, add on the stories to fill it in. So it's not just that, oh, just do the formula and that's it. The formula is just to get someone's attention and then reverse engineer into sort of a richer explanation of how and why it works. Yeah, so yeah, exactly. And so again, it can be applied to a nightmare. A company is it's got a CEO, an executive team, and they're struggling and they can't get into the black. The bottom line, it's always in the red, and people are being fired, and there's conflict, and there's bad press, and okay, that's the nightmare collectively. But if I have access to a CEO and we're doing the work together, in addition to all the practical things that they need to do to turn this around, we can begin to talk about how, in their miracle mindset, they can do the practice of switching the movie so this can all switch too, you know, at that corporate level. So there's so many different applications that are a lot of fun to help people apply.
Yeah, this gives me an example of someone I know personally, and I won't try to not reveal who they might be in my life, but someone close to me has always said that they want to be a rags to riches story. And I can see now that maybe they struggle with achieving the success that they've been working at for so long because they're still in the rags part of their story. And so it's hard for them to shift out, and maybe when they start to see success, I kind of notice that it's very short lived. And again, it's just like another hurdle for them, another fuel to their rags to riches story. So I think I'm going to share with this person that they need to get to the riches if they want to get out of the rags.
Exactly. That's a great illustration of what we're talking about because my story is a little bit like in the miracle world, it's a rags to riches story. oh, you got to really suffer in order for the contrast to be there. But that's not the case. So people can overinvest in the suffering, and then it actually holds us back for a longer time. Everything you just said about it is perfect. Also, our people who are familiar with us will notice that we bend over backwards not to be casual about exposing people when we use other people as illustrations. And you just did that beautifully, right? There's a high standard around confidentiality here when it applies to our clients, or our friends, or our family, unless we have prior permission to share. About myself, I can do it all day long, no problem. But it's been one of the interesting things to keep evolving around and growing with is how do you illustrate things with other people, but always disguise it so that nobody hearing it would say, "Oh, that's me they're talking about, and I don't like
Yeah,
it."
exactly.
So,
Yeah.
yeah. So that's it. That's why this is one of my favorite lessons. That's it in a nutshell. Thank you for everything you've helped to guide me through this today. Anything else you want to say or ask, and then I think we're at the end.
Quick question, even though I feel like we might have missed something. It just occurred to me that we didn't overtly connect this to forgiveness. So why don't you end
yes.
with that?
Man, I'm so glad you're doing this with me. You are so, today I was getting ready for this, and I said, it's such a delight to do this with Brittany, because she always has a way of bringing it back down to some practical things that sort of save each show. It's like, otherwise, like, people are like, oh, what does this have to do with forgiveness? Okay, so here it is. The connection to forgiveness is that by giving up attack thoughts, that's forgiveness. So the headline is, I can escape from the world or the movie or the nightmare I'm in by giving up my attack thoughts, forgiving. I think you made this point very early on in our series at the beginning of the year, that forgiveness has giving in it, giving up, so it's, yeah, by giving up our attack thoughts, that's the key element of forgiveness. And by giving up our attachment to our nightmare, it's a forgiveness process, right? Which then we forgive ourselves for having the nightmare, we forgive all the people who have entered into the nightmare, and we especially forgive God for being God and being more powerful than we are. And we say, okay, rather than fight against you to create this parallel anti-world that's so full of nightmare, and that's my claim to fame, I'll partner with you so I can have a beautiful movie with your power, activating the replacement movie for me. So we're forgiving ourselves, other people, and God in this lesson. Does that land? Absolutely. Or does that make sense?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, totally. I didn't think this one wasn't a big stretch. I just realized that we didn't use the word forgiveness in some of our language here. But the definition that you've been giving for forgiveness throughout this series has been releasing attachment to the falsified realities. So we've been talking about that through the whole episode, and replace it with forgiveness. Same.
I'm glad you caught it, because I was so in my head and so taking it for granted that it would be obvious. And again, you keep me grounded, and you keep me coming back to things that an audience, this is for the audience. And if they're not going to get it, then it's not as effective. We just weren't as effective. So thank you for always sort of bringing it back to, things that we need to say and do on the program to be effective for our audience.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I guess we will leave it there, but it's been a pleasure doing this with you again, Dave. We're already into October, and October is almost over. This year has just gone by so quickly. And yeah, I've got holidays around the corner, so let's do some holiday-themed forgiveness episodes coming up. I mean, we've got Thanksgiving coming, we've got Christmas, so
the New Year's.
So easy to, so easy to tie in forgiveness to these holidays.
Good point. Good point. I love it. I love how you're thinking about that. And for our audience as well, we love that you're following us, if you are, and we treasure your comments, your feedback, your questions. So don't hesitate to reach out to myself or Brittany through our each video in the comments section. We'd love to hear from you. So thank you.
Yes. Thank you for watching.
Yes.
And we will see you guys in November for our next episode. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye, Dave.
Bye, Brittany. Thank you so much.